Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'm wanting to welcome you to the Opera America Director-Designer Showcase. The Director-Designer Showcase is graciously funded by the Robert L.B. Tobin Foundation in Texas, and this is the third installment of this particular granting fund. They started in 2009. It's a biennial program offered as part of Opera America's continuing effort to foster emerging opera artists. This showcase, made possible through support from the Tobin Theater Fund, has been established to bring promising talent to the attention of the field and connect promising directors and designers with those who are in the position to advance their careers. This year, we had 24 applicants for the Director-Designer Showcase. They are given a choice of upcoming repertory that we select from the future season surveys. All contemporary, well, not contemporary opera, but modern opera from 1950 or more recent. And of the pieces that they were able to choose from, there were 7 works. These 4 finalist teams, amazingly, picked 4 completely different shows, although we did have 12, half of the submissions were for the Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagonny. Curiously enough. Our panelists are selected from experts within the field who are in the know about directors and designers and what it really takes to have an interesting and exciting artistic vision. This year, our 4 panelists were David DeVan, General Director for Opera Philadelphia, who is also going to be our MC today, Jane Greenwood, Costume Designer, Sam Helfrich, Stage Director, and Kurt Howard, Producing Director for Fort Worth Opera. As opera is intrinsically collaborative, the projects chosen were selected not only because they demonstrate the requisite creativity and skill, but because they display true collaboration, creative vibrancy, and collective passion. And with that, I will hand this over to David to MC this as we go through and do each team's design presentation. It'll be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions of the design teams, and Lindsay or I will be out there with the microphone for you to ask the team your questions.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Wait, are we on?
Yeah. We're on? Okay, great. So, wonderful to be here. It was a great privilege to be on the panel selecting these 4 finalists. I think we have 4 great examples of an amazing amount of creative energy from all 4 of these teams, and I think all the panelists felt that each one of these projects had a specific point of view that the teams developed towards the work, and that's principally the reason why they stood out amongst the rest of the cohort. So it's going to be a great opportunity for us to hear about how these came together and the thinking behind them. But the other great privilege of being on the panel is that each one of us was assigned to one of these teams to help mentor them in terms of putting a presentation together that would have the goal of basically you being interested in employing them. With that, we're going to turn it over to George in a moment to bring even more commerce to this. When we were doing the dry run, this felt very much like Price is Right. We've got contestants row, they're going to come up. So I guess that makes me Bob Barker for the afternoon. And it's a great pleasure to introduce George Cederquist, who is going to present A Silent Night, a work I know very intimately. And I'm going to just briefly say that one of the things that really struck the panel about George's team is a really strong conceptual framework for a story that's based in realism. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, George. Welcome.
All the mentors, thank you to Tobin Foundation, thank you to Opera America. On behalf of all of us finalists, we are so grateful for this opportunity. These sorts of competitions are commonplace in Europe, but my understanding is that in this country, in North America, this is the only one, and it's such an opportunity for us. On behalf of my designer, Marianna, and my lighting designer, Hughey, back in Chicago, we'd like to share with you where we are in our design process. So I'm going to talk you through our point of view on the piece, show you some research images and some renderings of the key events in the story. Do know that some of the images for all the presentations do appear dark on this screen, so be sure to visit us at our tables after the presentation. I invited Marianna and Sarah to collaborate on this opera for two reasons. Firstly, I was moved by Kevin Putt's evocative and nuanced score, and fascinated by Mark Campbell's multilingual libretto. And secondly, I was deeply moved by the central theme of loss that is in the piece, which I'll speak about in a minute. Our goal was to stage the emotional experience of fighting in a war. And we imagined that experience of being a soldier to be totally surreal. A nightmare that was hallucinatory and absurd. Almost as absurd as putting down your rifle on Christmas Day to play soccer with the enemy and then share chocolate and schnapps at halftime. Now, very few of us have fought in a war, but all of us have experienced loss, and each of the opera's characters also experiences loss. Loss of the people they love, of sanity, of innocence, and of faith. And the narrative itself is also about loss, the loss of the chance for peace. Silent Night shows us that peace is always possible, but also that such opportunities are often missed. These men experience peace briefly, but they fail to sustain it. The Christmas Day truce is not the end of the opera, it's only the halfway point. And I believe our failure to seize peace continues. For the audience, it's a small step from World War I to today. Afghanistan lurks in the trenches of the song. Silent Night challenges us as artists and as an audience to achieve sustained peace. What you see here is a key research image for us. It's a drawing by Otto Dix. We began by looking at the work of this eminent German artist who was, as a World War I soldier, a first-hand reporter of the experience of war. He saw dead bodies as the landscape itself. And this gives the idea that we need not adhere slavishly to realism with fake gunfire and blood, but rather we could design an abstract landscape to create a purely emotional space. And this abstraction is supported by Kevin Putt's contemporary and largely chromatic music. Begin the presentation by showing the key research that inspired our design. The costume design is historically accurate, and it's taken from the period of World War I. The soldiers' uniforms are color-coded, taking colors from recruitment posters of that time, with the French in blue, the Germans in red and gray, and the Scottish in brown. These colors are also used in the civilian clothes that appear in the production. The blue of the French in Madeleine's dress, the German red in Anna's costume, when she's playing the character in the opera at the beginning of the opera, and the brown of the Scotsman's wool suits worn prior to their enlistment. The scenic design was inspired by the work of Christian Volkonski, who is a contemporary installation artist whose work addresses the emotional aftermath of military conflict. And this led us to a single simple gesture, a mound of bloodied, distressed uniforms, helmets, and boots. As a technical note, in our production, in which we recreate this pile, we do so using a pre-made underlay to create the bulk of the structure, with a few layers of clothes and accessories on top. Let me talk through the four key events of the opera: the prologue, the battle, the trenches, and the mirrors. And the first is indeed the prologue. The opening to Silent Night shows the three central protagonists leading their peacetime lives and preparing for war: Nicholas from Germany, Jonathan from Scotland, and Audebert from France. And for Nicholas, as well as his lover Anna, that life is as an opera singer. So we begin in a German opera house in mid-performance of an opera. The setting is realistic, with swag curtains and a four-poster bed. The curtain would be flown in from above, and the bed tracked on from the wings. The opera is interrupted by the announcement that the war has been declared, and we hear the chorus begin to sing a German war song. The score suggests 13 voices. And these choristers in soldiers' uniforms are slowly revealed in silhouette behind scrim panels at stage right and stage left. Now, these panels are a key part of the overall design palette, and their ability to create silhouette is used in other ways in the production. And it's the overlapping images of opera singer and soldier that creates an atmosphere of terror, pressure, and suffocation, a feeling that's found later in the trenches. In Scotland, Jonathan leaves behind his church job to enlist, spurred on by his brother William. And the church window and the statue of St. Michael are the only architectural elements, and these again are tracked on from the walls. The scrim panels allow us to see the Scots soldiers prepare for war as they sing their own patriotic song. In France, Audebert leaves behind his pregnant wife, Madeline, and here the window, table, and door, also tracked in, create the atelier location as the French forces gather, singing in silhouette. The second event, the battle, is essentially a 5-minute transition from the peacetime homes of the protagonists to the horrors of the battlefield. And the male protagonists change into their uniforms at the downstage edge of the stage during the quintet. Directly upstage of them is an opaque drum, which allows the pile of bloody and distressed uniforms to be tracked on from upstage. The side panels remain open, and with the beginning of the discordant battle music, soldiers run on stage from the wings, adding clothes and debris to the central pile. Now, this music is marked apocalyptic in the score, and we felt that this sudden, dynamic shift in the staging, together with the solitary pile, supported that music well. First, the French and Scots enter from stage right, and then the Germans from stage left. And during these 5 minutes, there are choreographed sequence of back and forth movement. More and more clothes are added to the pile. At the end of which, William is shot and he dies in Jonathan's arms. The pile is complete, the panels close, sealing the space and suggesting the feeling of pressure and entrapment of the soldiers in their respective trenches. The third event is the trenches, and it's the setting in which the bulk of the opera takes place. Our aim here was again to recreate the emotional experience of being in the trenches rather than the physical one. Now, in the trenches, the enemy remains unknown, hidden, terrifying. Historically, and reflected in the narrative, there was little interaction between the Scots and French, although they were allies. And because of this separation, we felt that the audience shouldn't get access to all 3 trenches at once. Rather, the entire stage space represents the trenches. And note that in this setup, the only entrances are the downstage right and downstage left of the stage. This allows a group of soldiers to exit one side of the stage and another group to enter on the opposing side, creating flowing transitions between the scenes. And the score often provides plenty of music to support such entrances and exits. Also, our interpretation of the work focuses on the feeling of loss and isolation experienced by the soldiers at war. And as a result, the staging avoids filling the stage with soldiers played by choristers and supernumeraries, and instead often keeps only those who actually sing in a given scene on stage. Now, as the entire stage represents the trenches, shifts in the shape, angle, and intensity of the lighting further clarify which trench we're in, Scots, French, or German. And this dynamic lighting design is a second key element of our production palette. The landscape is devoid of color, as if the war has bled all life, and with it, color, out of the vista. Here's the Scots trench with the light coming from the high stage right side. Any additional hand props or citables that are called for in the text would be brought on by the singers. The French location uses light directly from above, and the German trench is lit from the low sides. However, the scrim panels can also allow us to see soldiers of other armies in silhouette, and this creates that same atmosphere of fear and terror seen earlier in the prologue when these soldiers were preparing for war. It reminds us that these men survived in the trenches under the ever-present threat of death. there are always other men out there wanting to kill you. The event of the truce takes place in no man's land between the trenches. Having climbed on top of the central pile, Nicholas sings a Christmas carol as a peace offering. The side panels open up for the first time since the battle at the beginning of Act 1, and the soldiers creep in cautiously from all sides. Now, color is also added into the lighting design. It's the first time. Up to this point, the scenic color palette has been entirely grayscale, but with the truce and with the hope for peace comes the amber color of the evening sky. The burial is the final key event that I'd like to talk to you about. We're now in Act 2, and in the story, the three lieutenants meet and agree to extend the Christmas truce for an additional morning so that each side can bury its dead. Anna, Nicholas's lover, sings movingly about the horrors of war and its effect on the women left behind, the wives, the mothers, the daughters. The marking here in the score is with quiet nobility, like a funeral march, and this suggested to us the following staging, that as Anna sings and the sun rises behind her, the men slowly begin to dismantle the central pile, ceremoniously folding the clothes and making smaller piles of uniforms, boots, and helmets. The sequence takes place during Anna's aria, so it's about 4 minutes. And at the end of this scene, the downstage scrim used earlier is flown in again to transition to the following scene, in which the generals discover that the three groups of men have declared a truce. This drop allows the remainder of the pile and its structural underlay to be tracked up and off stage. When the drop flies out of the final scene of the opera, the burial is complete, and we're left with a grid of small piles, suggesting tombstones in a graveyard against that same monochromatic backdrop of the trenches. The soldiers, having been shipped off to the front lines into certain death, exit by marching through the open panels which close behind them. In the final moments of the opera, we hear the voices of the men, unseen, singing off stage. And as the closing bars of the music fade to silence, we simply sit in that silence, in the graveyard, in the fading light, with the memories of those that we've lost forever. Thank you.
For that very articulate presentation. Questions for George about Silent Night? We have working people out there.
I got it.
Oh, someone's got a question.
Oh, do I get an A?
Yeah.
And you've left those trenches wide open. Did you feel that that was a radical choice, an appropriate choice? Were there any other options that went through your mind for the trenches?
I think what we really wanted to avoid was locking in three groups of men into three specific parts of the stage with nowhere to go. To pigeonhole the Germans upstage right and the French downstage left. I think we really wanted to focus on the feeling of isolation that these men experienced, and we could do that through the design we've created, where downstage we can focus on a single voice, a single figure, or two figures, and behind them, in silhouette, through the scrim panels, we can see those other soldiers to create that feeling of terror that you talked about.
Another question. Do you see something over here? Jay, no?
The floor was originally raised, and when we realized that we would be bringing stuff on from the wings, we immediately flattened it.
Just a point. The original design also had the clothes heap actually coming up through a false floor, or a track. And we talked a lot about that, and the team decided to use the scrim format in order to make it work in more teams.
Absolutely.
And that was also what changed with the break from me.
Absolutely right. I mean, I think that part of the mentorship process, David was, as he said, my mentor, our mentor, that we really tried to make this as practical and producible as aesthetically interesting and pleasing.
Any others? Yeah. Mark Campbell. Yes, we'll pay attention to
First of all, it's really amazing. I really love the concept. I think it's terrific. I have one kind of silly question.
Yeah.
It is Christmas, and it's freezing. There should be snow. Is that going to be projected on the panels, or is that even a consideration?
We initially thought about using haze in the air to get a similar feeling of that, which we cut again for practical reasons. And it was really Sarah who said, look, I can get that freezing feeling through the lighting design. Let's not have anything falling from the sky. Let's not worry about that. So much of the rest of the language of our design comes through lighting. Let's really sink all of our efforts into that aesthetic choice.
Good. I just, because it was freezing. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. And I should add, of course, that I think a lot of that feeling of freezing comes to the costume design as well. And you would see that, I think, in Marianna's design, through layers, through cloaks, through overcoats, through mittens and gloves.
Thanks, Mark. Great. I'm really thrilled that you're here for this, Mark. Great for the team. Anyone else? Great. Well, George, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for supporting all this.
From contestants row, Mojo, come on up. I'm going to let you introduce the team. I know we have a gaggle of people.
Yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Mo. Last name Joe. No middle name, it's Chinese. So my name is Mojo. I'm the director, and we'll be presenting Carlisle Floyd's Susannah. But before that, let me introduce you to my awesome team. This is my scenic designer, Mr. Tim Brown, and this is my costume designer, Lisa Lowe, and our amazing lighting designer who just joined us today. His name is Li Zhao. So, just to give you a little background on Susannah, I think most of you know the story pretty well. It's written in 1954, and it's retelling a biblical story about Susannah and the failures. But Carlisle decided to set it in where he initially grew up, East Tennessee, in a summer, and in a very confined village. So, when we first listened to the music, we're really struck by the sincerity and the straightforward of the music. And for me as a director, when I'm approaching a piece, I tend to figure out why are we doing this piece right now? What's the value for society? And to do that, I tend to just analyze what's the audience reaction, initial reaction when the piece first came out. Why did this piece stand the test of time? So by doing this parallel comparison, I feel like we feel very strong urge of doing a modern time, present world, because when Carlisle wrote this opera initially, he's meant to set the immediate present. So personally, I don't feel like we need to treat it as an antique piece. And when we did our research last year, it was about the campaign, the presidential campaign. So we find so much striking similarity of the entire McCarthyism and our present time. So I'll pass it to my set designer. We update our opera into contemporary time in a modern church forward. And Tim, would you like to elaborate more?
Yeah, sure. So Floyd's original stage direction was to set it in a claustrophobic forest, which is just the best stage direction that a scenic designer can get. And we set our claustrophobic forest inside, this is our key piece of research, inside the main church hall of this rural evangelical church in Tennessee, which is the setting of the original place, the original opera. So this church is able to isolate themselves from the outside politics, from other people's beliefs, and everything in their community takes place in this main hall. Their worship services, their funerals, their marriages, their square dances, everything takes place. So we have this claustrophobic world and this isolated world where the laws of this church can really, kind of devastate Susannah and really bring all the plot points to live within that world. Another image that we came across, if you look on the top right corner, was this trend of churches to put these outlandish neon crosses or very theatrical settings in their worship services. And we like this idea of this showbiz in religion and being able to show the spectacle in their worship. And I think that that fits right in with this opera. So I'll take you to our first scene is the hoedown, and this just sets up our main space, which we live in for the whole opera, which is our hall, which is made up of wood planks on the wall, on the ceiling, because we want to show that this church has a history to it. It's rural, it's an older building, but this community is established, and but then it's centered by this neon cross that brings us up to the modern world. It also has fluorescent lighting throughout, so that we can flick a switch on, and we can be very modernized this old church. And also has these large windows that allow natural light in, and we can have many different angles of light to change the mood and all the scenes.
And don't forget, we cover the ceiling. 2/3 of the ceiling we covered, so this will be finger-friendly. Just so you know. All right. Passing on to the next one. So since our setting concept is so simple and straightforward, costume will play a very crucial part in our whole concept. So personally, we are interested in presenting more symbolic. And on that note, my costume designer Lisa will tell you more about our costume concept.
So when we started looking at this community, we really had a lot of fun figuring out who these people were and what they looked like. This is a rural town, so there's a mixture of people who don't have a lot of money, people who have more money, who put money into buying the cross for the church. For the first scene, you see them in the square dance. We really get to have a lot of fun with color. Mostly the townspeople, I wanted to throw a lot of blues and greens on just to kind of unite them as a group. And then we move on to the elders. So they're the leaders in the community. And again, I wanted to group them into colors so that we can easily identify the main people. The men and elders are in the lighter colored warm summer suits, which will pull them out from the blue walls, and the women in their brighter colored suits. McLean being in pink and Hayes being in the purple on the right.
The outsiders.
Yes. And so for the outsiders, we have Susannah, who was trying to live within the community. One thing that we decided about the town is that they create their own rules and they live by their own rules. And so we decided that all the women wear skirts, especially church. So Susannah's in a dress, and we wanted to really make her stand out in a sweet yellow dress. And the elders' wives talk about how the cut of her dress is a little too scandalous for their taste. Where most of the women have higher necks and sleeves, she's a little more exposed. And then we have Olin Glitch, who is in a sleek, darker suit compared to the warmer, rumpled suits of the men in the community.
Fantastic. So, in the original opera, the second scene takes place on the porch of Susannah and Sam, her brother's little home. But since we're updating the modern time, we decided to change this location into one of the shelters room, foster's home, within the church. So in this sense, we will fly in a half wall, you cannot see very clearly, with bunk beds attached to the wall. That's where Susannah and her brother Sam will be staying. And in this way, so conceptually, we're putting Susannah and her brother more vulnerable because they are dependent on the church. And metaphorically, she she's stuck in the church. There's no way she can get out. And the only time she get out later is when she take a bath in the creek and she got cold. So she's stuck in an entire concrete jungle. Moving on. Costume-wise, as you see, we have a little bag which is the sound of the two elders, and so basically replicate of their appearance. Dorothy definitely has his own personal identity, just whatever character we put it on. And Sam is like the lone wolf of the community. We have a lot of regrets talk about how scary he is. So we decided put him on long hair and how to do it. Cut-off t-shirt, yeah, you get an idea. Moving on. As all of you know, I was in the dark. As all of you know, the R-rated to find Susannah is 80 to 29. So it's the first time we hear what she's thinking about. We see who she is as a person. So that's how we feel like. That's the part we would like to introduce more of the actual writing choice, which means we'll have a very starry night put it on during her aria. We can't really see any picture.
But basically, we'll be embedded into the walls will be these eyebrow neutrality so that we can really shift to this beautiful theatrical starry night and show what she's thinking about. And then just clicking on the fluorescence, we can stick her right back into the church where she's stuck and she's really can't think about these things.
Yeah, great. Let's moving on. Great. So, staging-wise, scene 3, this is where Susannah taken back in her crate, and she's seen by the 4 elders who's looking for a crate for baptism. And staging-wise, this is a very, very tricky part with directors, because to me, the whole point of this scene is we need to see the 4 elders' facial reaction, seeing them lusting over Susannah. That's where all the conflict taking place. So if you're putting Susannah upstage, you're going to lose all the charm. So our decision is to drop a show screen and have all the 4 elders facing out. That's in the audience area, that's where the crate will be. And Tim can help me like elaborate more. We have a super flight in the shadow, so all the way up, you're going to see her body.
Right, because of course we want to see the elder's face, but we also want to see Susannah's body so we can see what they're looking at. So for this, we have the scrim, and we'll have a super flying behind them for a glimpse of this body so that we can see what they are seeing. This is the one scene in the show that we left the church. This is Susannah's one place where she can go to be free, but then she gets caught by the others.
Yeah, as I said, one time she left the church, she got cold.
Yeah.
All right. Following scene, as you see, it's a dinner scene. That's the whole community condemning her, and you see it's the same space, but just different configuration. Moving on, please. Thank you. Just costume-wise, Susanna can tell more about this. We're trying to use a minimal costume for.
Right. So Susannah's pretty poor, and we decided that her wardrobe should reflect that. And so she has one pretty dress that she really likes wearing right now, and so she just accessorizes it in different ways. So in here we see her taking off the red belt and putting on the denim jacket.
Moving on. So, scene 5, that's where Susannah learned what happened and from his little bag. That's the moment she faced the harsh, naked truth. So, again, same space, like shelter, and they're putting her, because she's like the most naked moment, and it was like personal moment, so we decided to strip everything, just put her in a very simple yellow dress. And as you see, moving on to the Act 2, so that's about 3 days have passed since Act 1. And Susannah is right before she attended the Bible meeting. She learned her brother Sam is going to leave her alone at home and go hunting. So as you see, we make a drastic change. In Act 1, it's all about the little yellow dress. In Act 2, we change it to the pale rosy dress. Yeah, that's really about her just really accepting or being submissive to the role in a sniper, putting on more conservative dress and most vulnerable moment. Moving on, please. Thank you. This is the revival meeting. That's where you have a humongous chorus entrance. So again, same place. And we're just moving on. Costume plays a crucial part in this scene.
So for the townspeople, they get to be in more formal church-going clothes. And we wanted to really group them again into a color box that we can unite them. So they're in this dark color zone that makes them become sort of an overwhelming force. And then for the elders, they're again in the same color block, but with a little bit more color, in their shirts to pop them out. And then Lich now has become their leader. So he is still in the blue, but he's a very bright blue, so he can stand out as the leader. And Susannah comes in her bright pink dress and totally stands out.
Yep, this is for Susannah's second major aura in Act 2. So once again, we decided to introduce, dim the whole room, bring out the starry nights, and by dimming the whole main hall, we will also help them, of course, from previously making their exit. Tim, would you like to add anything more?
Right, so we dim it so that then the stage can be cleared, so then when Lich will be revealed and we can go into our seduction scene where they're in the empty church with just light from the parking lot outside coming through the big windows and the neon cross there. So it's a very, very and kind of beautiful scene, just the two of them in the empty space.
So, next scene. So that's the scene. You see, dress change. So that's the morning after, you can say, after the race. So Susannah will change her costume into pants. That's the first time we see a woman in this opera wearing pants. Now, just for, I would say, that's her personal moment, waking up, realizing her own body, realizing her own sexuality, and as you see, we're adding more color. We'll have a special session talking about the color choices in her costume. So moving on. Thank you. So, final scene. Final scene, what happened is Sarah returned and found out what's going on, and Sam shot Owen Lynch while he's giving baptism in the creek. So now I'm being played as plausible here. I did my research on baptism in the river. If someone's shot, of course his blood will leave the river in the stream and saturate everyone's life standing next to him. So with that note, we think when the whole chorus came on stage, ensemble came on stage, they need to be in their baptism garment, white, and with different layers of things like blood stain. And can we jump that? Metaphorically, the closer you are to Owen Bridge, the more power you have in this community, the more blood you have on your garment clothes. So metaphorically, I mean, the more crime they have committed in this entire conspiracy or scandal, the more blood they'll have it. Next one, so that would be Susannah as the only person with dry and clean clothes. And little bag is partial just because I don't want to give a piece of person messenger. I don't want to give away too much about our choice, right? And also keeping it relatively low and flat in the whole process. So you'll be very clean baptism garment with literally drenched in water on the trim. Yeah. So, and also because Violet didn't happen on stage, having a bloody chorus drenching with water, stripping water, is really just reminding everyone of violence of the murder. Right. So, as you see, we have talking about the arc of the character, of the title character Susannah. We really want to see the character's progression just through the transgression of the color and costume. And Lisa can tell you more about our choice.
So again, we start in the youthful, vibrant yellow, where she's most innocent. And then as the opera progresses, the color deepens. We add red to it, and in the end, she's in the red shirt.
So we see the color advantages in adding. Yes. Great. So by the very end, we're thinking about what is the story of Susannah? Is she a victim? To me, no, not at all. I feel like this offer is particularly relevant to our society, particularly to a younger generation. I don't see Susannah as a victim. I think in the end, she actually triumphed in everything. Because she reclaimed her body. The final moment, she reclaimed her body. By reclaiming her body, accepting her own sexuality, she revived her own faith. So that's the message I want to introduce to the nowadays younger generation. When you're facing a tougher sort of social situation, accepting who you are, reclaim your own self, and then you can be your own. You can say that, you can be your own God. Okay. On that note, and also 2014, which is next year, will be the 60 years anniversary of this opera first came out. So it's a production we would really love to see on stage. Thank you very much.
so much. One of the things that struck the panel about this particular concept was just the strength of the unified approach in making a bold choice for the setting and then just being so well hung together to help tell the story. So great job. Questions for Mojo, Tim, or Lisa? Yeah, back. Larry.
Hi.
The idea of the shelter being inside the church is very important to your concept. How do we visually know that this is a space that is actually part of the church?
I think that it's really, I think that the world of the fluorescent light and the world of the industrial look of it, I think we make it feel like it's part of the basement. I think that there's also things that we can do with set dressing. We can have various posters or others, make it look like it's a storage place for maybe some of the chairs. And I think there's ways to kind of creep in that visual idea to make it, I agree it's important so that we can see that it is. I think it's also very clear that it's not a house. So I think that's going to help us immediately, that this isn't their house. This isn't a place that should be a home. So I think that would help us.
We would like to see the trays of time, so it'll be very rusty bunk bed, and we will get a little bit more detailed personal items, like maybe a stuffed animal or something. Get a sense it's something they set up in their room, but it's not really their room. Yeah.
Scott, did you have a question as well? Save question. David, back here.
Yes, can you please expand on what we would see as she's swimming and lying behind the elders? What exactly, it's hard to imagine what that is.
Right. Well, so the idea is that we would layer scrim so that we would be able to do the effect of just barely seeing her body swimming as if we're looking down into the water. So we would see, go back to that image where we look at we would see the elders on stage facing forward and surrounded by this light of shadows of the water and the trees breaking up the scrim so that it looks so flat. And then in a moment we'll see, I'm not saying that we see her swimming for the whole scene, but for a moment we'll see her body as in swimming above us. Just for a moment, and a naked body as well. And one of the funny things was we asked Jane Greenwood, was our advisor, and we were wondering, so what do we do? How do we make a suit for, like, show a naked person flying? How do you put a harness on a naked person? And she just said, you put a harness on a naked person. so that's where we would start. But I think that's what we want to see. We want to see this female figure, swimming. And just for a moment, because I think if we do it for too long, you'll see the wires, you'll see the trick.
Great. Any other questions?
Going back to their cabin, the residence, where they have their bunk beds. That first scene, there's a lot of reference to Susannah looking at the sky at night, the stars. Are they in an interior? Is that what you want us to feel? Is she imagining what's outside? Was she looking through an imaginary window? How do you deal with the impression of the setting you've got, which is strongly an interior, and her referring constantly to the exterior?
Right. I think that we could do either or. I think that there is a sense that we could have it when we very clear and solve that problem. Quickly, we have a window, we have a window. I know our lighting designer E is very interested in using light for that scene to suggest that there's either a sliver of a window, a small window in that room that she can be looking out of and have the light coming in, so that there's that semi-underground type of place. But I think that with our two arias that we have her, we create the night sky at, I think that it's also part of her imagining it as well. So I think there's like a her fantasy of it.
Great. I think we're out of time, so thank you so much. Congratulations. Now, kind of relax everyone. Yeah. So, Walker, take it away. I know you will be shy about it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming to a presentation of the Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagonny. I'm Walker Lewis, the director. We also have David Meyer, our set designer, and Grace Trimble, our costume designer, who are going to come up later. We'd like to extend a special thank you to Opera America and the Tobin Fund for making this possible, and a really special thank you to Laura Lee Everett and Sam Helfrich, our mentor, for all their help. You know, so often when I would mention to someone that we were working on Mahagonny, they would whisper to me, "Hey, that's my favorite opera." And it just happened again and again, and we really agree. We feel that this is the ideal opera for our times, especially in the United States, and every bit as dangerous as it was when it was first written. It's a disturbingly vivid mirror of the greed and the irresponsibility dividing our country right now. And it illuminates all too well how the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the fat cats always seem to get away with murder. And it's just fun. Mahagonny has razor-sharp satire, larger-than-life characters, and a surreal sense of geography and time that really fed into our concept. The founding of the city of Mahagonny, otherwise known as Suckerville. Act 1 opens on a deserted coastline of Florida in 1964. And here comes a trio of Beckett, Fatty, and Moses that foreshadows the climactic end of Act 1 and the ultimate demise of Mahagonny in a huge hurricane. When Beckett realizes that they're on top of the former whiskey distillery, she knows the search for the next Mahagonny location is over. Mahagonny was created for one reason and one reason only: to make money. To illustrate this, we made the central image of Mahagonny the cold and industrial form of a factory. This is just one of the long line of Mahagonnys, each one mirroring the three stages of capitalism as Brecht saw it: birth, boom town, and self-destruction through unbridled greed. The trio are the immortal demigods of capitalism that destroy and create cities wherever they go. Here's our ground plan. The distillery is comprised of 3 freestanding tower units with interconnected conveyor belt trusses. The motorboat is a simple 2-dimensional cutout rigged to travel on top of the crane. The idea of 2-dimensional collage-like scenic elements is really important to our concept of a very soulless, surface-driven place that constantly destroys and reinvents itself over time. The trio arrives in heavy rain gear, which is shed to reveal a classic gangster look with fedora hats and a colorful, semi-muted 1960s palette. Jenny and the girls arrive via inner tube from Cuba, here to cash in on the new Joy Town. And you see again the 2-dimensional cutout waves moving in the background. The factory now starts to look like a Gilligan's Island-style simple resort. And Fatty and Moses make a Visit Florida-themed TV commercial to attract the miserable workers in the great cities. Why did we set Mahagonny in Florida? Florida is part tropical paradise, part fantasy realm of Disneyland and Cape Canaveral, and part Sin City. Florida seems to contain all the crazy contradictions of the USA within one state. It's a place where absolutely anything could happen, for better or for worse. In 1964, it was the perfect escape, where you could blow some money on a vacation or set up your retirement. Here's Jenny and the girls in 1960s swimwear, high-waisted bikinis and funky prints. Jim and the lumberjacks arrive, paddling straight from Alaska via canoe, to spend some hard-earned dough on whiskey and women. mountain man outfits show the hard work and strife they went through to earn their money. They wore leather, furs, various weapons and tools for living in the wild, as well as big bushy beards. While Joe, Jake, and Bill adapt to the new environment and its temptations, Jim stays true to his ideals and keeps his original red flannel shirt for the rest of the show. Tourists pour into Mahagonny from cruise ships, and the town starts making a modest profit off whiskey and prostitutes. But soon the serenity of the sleepy resort scares away all of its customers. The trio soon realizes that only a massive injection of commercial vice will keep their investment alive. And that brings us to Act 2. A year later, Mahagonny is booming. Act 2 opens in 1984 Miami, an amped-up boom town in Sin City. This act is all about the decadence and waste of the 80s. Neon conveyor belts serve unlimited quantities of pleasure products to a ravenous populace. Neon signage is revealed, and new conveyor belts are added carrying two-dimensional cutout objects. Jake, center, eats himself to death in the ultimate all-you-can-eat buffet, becoming the first friend Jim loses to greed and vice. Costumes, reminiscent of the 80s TV shows Dallas and Miami Vice, set the tone for flashy decadence and underworld crime. We see Bedkit in a bigger hat, Moses in large-scale pinstripes, and Fatty in bright fuchsia, while the lumberjacks and male chorus sport pastel suits, no socks, sunglasses. Jenny and her ladies bring an 80s trashiness to the party, with leather, vinyl, and fringe. Jim, once again, stays true to himself and his original outfit, even as the entire city is changing around him. In the loving section, the factory commercializes sex and becomes a profitable red light district. Silhouettes of couples appear within the silos. Gambling takes center stage as the factory becomes a high-stakes boxing ring, roped with neon. Money finally trumps mercy and humanity as the heartless gamblers laugh at Alaska Wolf Joe's pathetic death in the ring. The factory now mass produces liquor. With two of Jim's friends dead, he deliberately bankrupts himself, buying rounds of drinks for strangers. Jim, Jenny, and Bill erect an impromptu mast and sail on the tiki bar, and sing a song about a boat lost in a stormy sea. Through lighting and chorus movement, the stage is transformed into a seascape, and we see the boat as a microcosm of Mahagonny itself, utterly lost and doomed to the wrath of Medusa. Jim finally commits the only crime possible in Mahagonny. He cannot pay his bar tab. This sets up his high-stakes trial in the next act. Every city has its own notion of what is just, and Mahagonny's was no sillier than that of any other place. Act 3 opens in a futuristic, urban Miami, ruled by the stock market. The factory is now a multinational investment firm, whose silos has become skyscrapers, and whose conveyor belts are now stock tickers that deliver up-to-the-second news flashes of Jim's trial. The windows are projected onto the silos, as well as a live video feed offering close-ups of the trial action. The look for Act 3 costumes is dark, futuristic, and minimal. The trio look more sleek and corporate, and Jenny has adapted into a powerful businesswoman. Jim is in a distressed, battered version of his previous look. Bill has sold out completely to the new world and become a shark-like financier. Behind him is a stock trader and the Occupy-style protesters about to appear. We see big class differences in costumes for the first time in the opera. Jim is found guilty, and his execution leads to the market's inevitable crash. Worldwide chaos ensues. Projections create the illusion of a city in flames, and stock tickers default to zero. Occupy-style demonstrators fill the stage, and one of the silos opens to reveal piles of stolen cash. Factory silo becomes pink canaveral rocket silo, as the billionaire trio escapes scot-free to exploit new worlds. Their rocket spews dollar bills as it departs. Planet Earth collapses in flames, falling victim to its own greed. And here comes the trio. Dr. Strangelove style. Thank you very much. Come on down.
So clearly they have something to say. We were kind of blown away by the wit in the panel on satire and the pathology of greed that is so permeates this piece. So just really congratulations. And very entertaining today. So questions for the team?
One of the big things on all that is that projection, or is that three-dimensional prop work? Or
I think we would embrace lightweight, two-dimensional cutouts, that idea of surface and image being everything, and very false at the same time. So the idea is that as a conveyor belt tracks off stage, those lightweight objects are handled off and put on the next conveyor and sent on their way. So it could be as easy as a Velcro surface that's carrying these lightweight Velcro props. And the only three-dimensional props with food that Jake would handle and eat coming on the downstage only conveyor belt, I think he would embrace some reality there so that he can have a plate of spaghetti or a cheeseburger and really show the quality.
And all of the large moving objects like the motorboat and the rocket ship would be two-dimensional cutouts, very, very simple construction to emphasize that feeling of surface values, image-based society.
John, good to see you. Looks like I planted 4 people to ask questions.
Again, have to keep running this microphone down here. The ending of this piece, and it's a tricky piece to find some coherent concept for. All the chorus appear to rebel against the forces when they say no as opposed to yes. No, says the people of Mahagonny. No, says the people of Mahagonny. What's all that about, and how does your design respond to that apparent popular surge of interest to change this killer capitalist world?
Well, it's reflected in Occupy-style protesters. So at first, the chorus of the third act are basically employees of the company. They're all stock traders, essentially. At the very end, they become Occupy Wall Street-style protesters who have realized all their money is being stolen, the billionaires are getting away with everything.